Good day, colleagues. Good day, everyone. Welcome to this webinar of the Sub-Saharan Africa Regional Working Group of the LPSA. My name is Jaap de Visser. I am one of the co-chairs of the Regional Working Group, and I'll have the pleasure of convening and chairing this meeting this afternoon with my colleagues. So thanks very much for joining. We've got a relatively small group, still some people joining, no doubt, as time progresses. But let's start with our proceedings. So the topic for today's working group is constituency development funds. We thought it was a good idea to talk about CDFs because of their distinct role in decentralization, democratic governance, and local development. Because when government transfers funds to local governments or to regional governments using a traditional transfer or a grant, it works differently from the CDF concept, because CDFs are monies managed by constituency representatives, national politicians who have a national mandate, but who exercise direct influence either through a committee or some sort of structure over local spending priorities in that particular locality or region where the CDF funds are channeled to. So it's an innovative method of transferring funds to local areas, but also comes with institutional challenges. Particularly, how does it compare? How does it align? How does it fit into a country's decentralization program, where in that locality there are local governments, local authorities with their own spending priorities, with their own plans, their own budgets. And here comes then a CDF activity or a CDF infrastructure project that may or may not align well with the local government's plan or priority. So that has been sort of the debate about CDFs. Do they enhance local development? Do they enhance local democracy? Or are they a stumbling block in the implementation of decentralization systems? So that is the reason why we came together on this theme, which we wanted to discuss with you and with our experts. The three experts that we have gathered on this topic, we're very privileged to have them with us, starting off with Dr. Conrad Bozire from Kenya, who is a constitutional lawyer, public finance expert with a wealth of experience in devolution and fiscal reform. I know him very well as a former colleague at the Dalla Omar Institute in Cape Town, where I am working. Conrad did his PhD at the Institute, so we spent quite a bit of time together in Cape Town. So it's wonderful to have you with us, Dr. Bozire, and welcome to this morning's meeting. We also have Mr. Andrew Chitembo from Zambia. He is the founder and board chairperson of Anchicon, company with over 5 decades of experience in public, corporate, and development finance. So we're very, very privileged to have Andrew here with us to share his insights on the experience from Zambia. We were supposed to be also joined by Honorable Gertrude Chirambo from Malawi. She's a former councillor, also active in national politics, president of the Malawi Women Councillors Caucus. We're waiting for her to join. She has been quite caught up and seized with the general elections in Malawi. So we hope that she can still join us. But in the meantime, I think it's time to commence the discussion. Before I kick off the discussion with our three guests, two, hopefully three guests. Just handing over to my colleague, Jacqueline Mutura, very quickly. She works for LPSA as the coordinator of the working group, just for a few remarks on how we conduct a meeting going forward, the do's and don'ts of the webinar. Jacqueline, over to you.
Thank you, Yap. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today, and I'm sure as many of our participants are. Welcome, everyone. As we begin, please take note of a few meeting etiquette guidelines to ensure a smooth and productive session for all. I think it's a topic we are all interested in, and I'm sure we are eager to listen in and to share our experiences. For us to move on, kindly keep your microphone muted at all times unless it is your turn to speak. This will help us in minimizing background noises and maintain focus for everyone who's participating. For any questions you may have, you can feel free to use the Q&A box. You can also share your thoughts in the chat box, in the chat function. And feel free to keep engaging with the discussions and with the speakers in the chat box and in the Q&A box. We will be monitoring those questions and we will collect them and share them with the moderator. Yap will be moderating and he will be looking at those questions and directing them to the experts. We invite you to stay engaged by listening carefully, of course, to the speakers. And please feel free to give your thoughts and your experiences in the chat box, and we will really appreciate. Please keep digital distractions to a minimum, and keep notifications on silent and focus on to help us focus on the ongoing discussion. At the end, I will come back with a few announcements for the working group, but back to you, Yap.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. As always, perfect organizational information there for us to take note of. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. So yeah, let's get into the discussion about CDFs. So we want to collect experiences from at least two, if hopefully three countries, through the participation of our experts, Conrad Bozire from Kenya, and Andrew Chitembo from Zambia. And the way we thought we would have this conversation is by way of a dialogue, essentially looking at three issues. The first one is, okay, just how does it work? How does the CDF system work in your country? Secondly, how does it align with, link in, or perhaps rub up against the decentralization program of your country? And thirdly, what is the way forward? What do you think should happen? What is your view? So starting off with the first issue, and I want to ask this question of Dr. Bozira first, and after his answer, I'm going to go to Andrew Chitemba and ask him the same question. So if you don't mind, Conrad, could you give a quick overview of how does the system of constituency development funding work in Kenya? Because we know there are different CDF systems across Sub-Saharan Africa. They have a lot of similarities, but they also have different origins, different historical backgrounds, different legal frameworks. Can you share with us how does it work in Kenya before we really get into the question of, do we like it or not? Do we like it in terms of decentralization or not? We reserve that for the second round of questions. Just how does it work in Kenya? Dr. Bozira, over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Devisa. And it's indeed a pleasure to join you today and other colleagues on this very important topic. So I'll very quickly just dive into a brief background on CDFs in Kenya. And maybe just to mention that CDF has been with us for some time. The bill introducing the CDF was tabled in Parliament sometime in 1998 and then adopted, and the first disbursements came out in 2003. Maybe just some brief 2-3 points from the historical perspective. on this. During the colonial times, the local authorities actually used to perform functions, very substantial functions in the service sectors, in roads, in health, education. So basically, if you needed a dispensary or a health center, a school, or a road, you approached your local area committees, who then laid it as a proposal in the local council, and this was approved. And then with national and municipal plans, the services were provided. But in 1969, a law was passed which transferred these very substantial functions to the national government. It was called the Local Government Transfer of Functions Act, that placed the building of roads, building of hospitals, establishing of schools. Even the hiring of teachers was previously done by local authorities. All these went to the sectoral ministries. And basically, what this did was to render councillors in the former local authorities generally irrelevant in local service provision. They were left with very minimal functions and completely diminished resources, which reverted to the sectoral ministries at the national level. Correspondingly, this had the effect of inviting national legislators into the local service provision space. So more than ever before, they were involved in local service provision, establishing of schools, dispensaries, building of roads. And while it was the case that they were judged by what projects they have brought in the community, but this intensified with that gap that they tried to fill. And during this period, then, of course, the ministries took over, and the MPs became, the national legislators became the intercessors of the communities with the ministries in Nairobi. And at that time, we also had this, it's called Harambee in Kenya. Basically, it means public fundraising for local projects. You need a school, then you call the local leaders, the administrators, the politicians, and they all contribute to build a school, a hospital. And this is in the 70s, 80s, 90s. So either by design or default, the MPs were intensely involved in local service provision, and basically those arrangements eclipsed the local authorities out of the scene. And MPs started carrying a staggering burden on local service provision. And the CDF, therefore, was conceived as an idea that would help ease the burden that the national legislators had of building local projects in those sectors which I've just mentioned, as a means of getting the seat or retaining the seat as national legislators. And the CDF was unanimously supported at that time, especially by politicians, because it gave them a fund basically to do local development and use that as the basis for adopting. So in 2010, the devolution, the Constitution adopted very extensive devolution structures, where the functions that were typically funded by CDF now fell under the county governments. So currently, maybe to answer that before we move to the next, is that the CDF operates alongside county governments, and there's been a futile attempt to delineate the functions under CDF, that now it funds exclusively national government functions, while county governments do other projects and functions which are not under national government. And basically, there is court challenges to the constitutionality of these arrangements, and it's something that we'll discuss later. But as of now, CDF still exists, very strongly supported by MPs, and it basically exists parallel to the county government system. And there is, as I said, an attempt to delineate exclusive national government functions at the county level. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Conrad. Just a quick follow-up question from me, for this, just for those of us who are not familiar with the mechanics of how it works. What are the mechanics of the disbursement of CDF funding? How does it work? Who makes the call on what projects to fund, and how does it actually get operationalized, the disbursement of funds to projects?
Thank you, Yap. Sorry, that was an important component that I should have included. I think it's a bias of my Kenyan knowledge of this. Yeah, so the CDF is established under an act of parliament. And basically, the law says that 2.5% of revenue generated nationally is allocated to the fund. And the fund, at the division of revenue, it falls to the national level of government. And basically, before national revenue is shared, because county governments take 15% at least of the national revenue, and then the national government remains with the 85%, although sometimes the county share goes up. But the main point is that currently the arrangement by statute is that before you determine national revenue to be shared, the CDF is actually taken out. And this is because Parliament, which has the budgeting powers, has become very protective of this fund. So it is taken out. Now we have the national, now it became from the Constituency Development Fund to the National Government Constituency Development Fund. And so it's called NGCDF from CDF. And there is a board that manages these funds. They receive proposals and they disburse funds to constituency offices. So the board, the NGCDF board, has staff that are located in each of the 290 constituencies in the country, and we have project committees who are drawn from the area community representatives, from state agencies at the community level, and these the project committees submit project proposals to the NGCDF board at the national level. They undergo a scrutiny to ensure that they are national government. They undergo a scrutiny to ensure there is public participation, and then they approve those projects to be funded. So once those are approved and there's an allocation from national government, then the board disburses those funds in every fiscal year to the constituency. And basically, it is the NGCDF staff that does this project. There was some revisions to that because initially the MPs chaired these boards. They basically composed them. They are the ones who did this. But with the challenges that the CDF received under the current constitution, they made an attempt to separate the influence of MPs or the MPs in the structures of the NGCDF. So it exists as a parallel body to the national government and the county governments, and focusing on exclusive national governments at the county level and all that. So basically, that is the structure, and that is how funds move to projects at the constituency level. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Bozire. That was very, very clear and very useful. So that gives us an excellent picture of how CDFs work in Kenya. So let's move southwest to Zambia and bring in Andrew Chitemba from Zambia to give us an overview of, so then how does it work in Zambia? Perhaps there are similarities in terms of history, but no doubt a different system would be applicable in Zambia. So we're very keen to hear from you, Andrew, how it works in Zambia. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, perfectly. We can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you so much. In Zambia, the CDF has roots in our desire since the independence to decentralize our local government activities. At independence, local authorities had discretionary functions that were stipulated in the law, but it was just in the statutory law, not in the Constitution, and therefore, at some times, these functions were changed more regularly. So, because in local government, certain central government decisions like removing some levies and selling houses that used to be local authority property from which they could get rent, those were sold off. So the revenue base of local authorities became quite narrow. And therefore, CDF was started in 1994. It was started through the government circular number 10, which instituted the CDF and the Youth Development Fund for funding projects at local level. But in 2016, the CDF was included in the Constitution as an article 162 that it should be there. It should be part of the landscape. And that Constitution also defined the exclusive functions of central government and exclusive functions of local government. And there was something in between called concurrent functions of central government and local government, and provincial government. But from our point of view as local government practitioners, central government and provincial government is all central government. So the Constitution lists the central government functions and the local authority functions. And as a result of this, there was an act, CDF Act number 11 of 2018, that provided for the operationalization of the constitutional provisions. And then we revised that act in 2024 with the CDF Act number 1 of 2024. Now, the process of allocating funds starts at wards in Zambia. In Zambia, we have, first of all, on one side, we have 116 local authorities. Then on the other side, we have 150 or 153 constituencies. And each constituency has substructures called wards. These have always been there, but now they've been also incorporated as legal entities, which was not the case before. So the ward development, the wards are a substructure of the constituency, and there is ward development committees who identify local priorities of what projects they want implemented in the wards. And the rules indicate that 60% of available funds should go to community projects, which can be water, hospitals, schools, and stuff like that. And that 20% goes to projects carried out by youth and or women, and that another 20% goes to the building and improvement and maintenance of secondary schools and skills training centers, and for bursaries. For those needy students who need bursaries, they can be given bursaries from the fund but the recommendations come from the ward, which is the substructure of the constituency. The constituencies are about 153. The wards are almost 2,000 or thereabouts. So it's really rather very local arrangements that decide what their priority projects are. And these projects are submitted to the local authorities for review and for managing within the budgeted resources so that the priority projects are implemented. When the local authorities reviews, they send the approved projects to the central government. Now, between the 2018 Act and the 2024 CDF Act, we've moved a little bit. Well, decentralization in Zambia has always been a work in progress and moving generally in the right direction, but not always. But between the 2018 Act and the 2024 Act, the approvals or the reviews for these projects was brought down from government because before that, all approvals were made by the Minister of Local Government, and the feasibility of a minister or one ministry in Osaka approving, even if we had one project from each ward approving 2,000 projects in places that they have no idea where they are, was really ridiculous, if one might say. But the 2024 Act has moved this down to the provincial local government office to approve. The idea being that they're closer to the local authorities and the wards, and that if there are projects that can have impacts across provinces, they're in a better place to approve. So the approval has been brought down a little bit to the local area, at least provincial level. And when the lists of projects that are approved are ready for implementation, each council initiates the process by presenting the projects that are ready, and the Ministry of Finance directly sends these monies to the appropriate local authority to manage on behalf of the communities that asked for the funds. Now, the local authority is also obliged to report on the implementation of the projects that were approved to central government. So that's the process that we have at the moment. The whole CDF thing and decentralization in general has been a process that has been moving in the right direction since independence. Occasionally, we get setbacks, like in 1 year, most of the major local authorities had opposition councillors, so the government felt a bit uncomfortable. So they slowed down the pace, even sort of drew back some of the activities. But from the fact that these provisions are now in the Constitution and provided for in the Act, and the Acts themselves are being revised 2018, 2024, the process is going in the right direction, but we still have some ways to go. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Chitembo. I think that was very, very useful and very insightful, because it really paints a a different picture from the picture that we got from Kenya. A few differences that I pick up, which I think are quite notable, is, starting off with the fact that CDF projects are submitted to the local authority for review. So the local authority at some point in the process gets involved and reviews the suitability of the projects, which I think is something I didn't hear coming through from the Kenyan example. And also ultimately, I think as you explained, Mr. Chitembo, that ultimately the funds are sent to the local authority and are managed by the local authority on behalf of the community that requested the funds. So even though they are in name the same constituency development fund, Kenya and Zambia, I think the implementation is quite different, at least if I understand the two inputs correctly, where Conrad was saying this is a parallel national structure. Yes, it has local offices, but the funds are managed by that national entity locally, not by the local authority, and the local authority are not necessarily requested to review the projects. At least that's how I understood it. So very interesting, different perspectives coming through, and as a result, I think also a slightly milder or more positive assessment of CDFs by Mr. Chitembo in the Zambian context. Because as I was hearing from you, Conrad, to bring you back into the conversation, that and you also mentioned the core challenges and the constitutional difficulties of the parallel existence of the CDF. It rubs up against the devolution agenda of the Kenyan constitution. Would you mind expanding on that a bit? How do you see it, or not fitting in, or not fitting into the decentralization or devolution agenda of Kenya? Over to you, Conrad.
Thank you very much, Professor Devisa. Yes, so as you've heard from that background that I provided earlier, and a very interesting contrast with what is taking place in Malawi. So we didn't have much difficulty with the structure of CDF before 2010, even though studies back then had shown that CDF, with its political will through MPs, its currency, and the visible voice of MPs, had sort of eclipsed the former local authorities. It eclipsed them further from the local service provision space. Basically, agitation for local services almost turned exclusively to CDF from the former local authorities. And this is because funds were basically associated with MPs back in the day. And even then, now, even though they have tried to make some structural adjustments to make it constitutional under the current arrangements. But just to mention that the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal, and the High Court have all ruled on the constitutionality of the general structure of the CDF before. And basically, two main grounds were advanced for its constitutionality. One is that the CDF, especially as it was before, and even now, the patronage of national legislators, members who belong to the legislative branch of government, and the role that they play in oversight. That was the first ground that the courts gave before about the unconstitutionality of CDF. They also alluded to the potential incursion into the space of county governments, because the fourth schedule to the current constitution allocates functions which belong to the county level. And some of the typical projects, most of the projects that were carried out under CDF before 2010 80 to 90% actually now are vested constitutionally in the county governments. But they said continuation of CDF type projects from 2010 to post 2010, pre-2010 to post-2010 would potentially infringe on the county government functions as allocated in the constitution. Hence, the attempt by Parliament to retain this fund by making it distinct in some ways. One, as I said, they changed CDF, Constituency Development Fund, to National Government Constituency Development Fund. And then they have tried to make a distinction, and they have said actually in their proposed constitutional amendment that this is to exclusively to fund exclusively national government projects in the at the local level. And they have also removed structurally, not actually. They have removed MPs from the management of this by creating a separate board to do all this in an attempt to remove the conflict of roles between oversight and implementation that was identified with the earlier versions of the law that they had. Actually, when the previous law was challenged, Parliament quickly passed another law where they changed the title and also removed some of the structures which were being attacked. Now contrasting with Mr. Chitembo's remarks, if you tell a Kenyan on the streets that CDF in Malawi has nothing to do with the MPs, they'll be very surprised, because here we know that the CDF is managed by, and not really, but patronized, that it's the MPs kitty to bring development and all that. So those different trajectories. But when you apply the constitutional principles, the devolution of power and the establishment of the county governments, and also the previous studies which had showed that this CDF is basically taking out or occupying space that under normal decentralization programs should be the case in normal designs. And that is actually now the current debate in Kenya. There is a very strong push and insistence by legislators to retain this fund, mainly because of voters' demands that they need to show projects that they have implemented, they need to show projects that they have brought access to services and all that. So, and they say that CDF is what has made contribution. There are studies which showed that CDF, because of its size compared to the former local authorities, and its turnaround because it's MPs and plans, and then immediate funding from the board, and then the cycle in terms of development and the size, there were more advantage than the former local authorities. So there are studies which showed that in terms of the turnaround for services and all that, CDF was seen as a better and more efficient way of doing this and all that. But fundamentally, at the core of its design, there are very serious questions to be raised: separation of powers, decentralization, and the organic structure of the government as provided for at the national and county level. And those are the two opposing things which are being debated. So Parliament has come up with a constitutional amendment to entrench CDF in the constitution, alongside the other CDF type of funds. They have established what they call the Senate Oversight Fund, basically a slush fund for senators to do oversight in county governments. And then we have the National Government Affirmative Action Fund. This is given to women representatives, MPs elected from the county constituency level, to represent gender at the national level. And basically, they also have a fund to do projects and all that. So they want these three funds to be made constitutional, and there's a constitutional amendment process. It has already gone through the National Assembly, and now it has been passed on to Senate for debate. So the senators have their oversight fund there, and then the members of the National Assembly have their CDF. And as I've said, there are very serious questions being raised about the structure that is being proposed now to constitutionalize this. And then, of course, with the principles like separation of powers and all that, they have really tried to separate what role, direct role that MP plays, but the cloud of influence of MPs over selection of projects, over prioritization of projects, and accountability issues in 2024-2025 financial year. Only 23 out of 290 constituencies received clean audit reports. So there's also all those issues which cloud the persistence and retention of this fund in the current situation. So it occurs to me that even though we are talking about CDFs, the name, we are talking about totally different structures. Looking at, for instance, Malawi and Kenya, and I look forward to hear what debate, and especially if there are any Kenyans, Judy, Jacqueline, your views on this and the way forward in a way that can retain the constitutional objectives. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Conrad. It's fascinating to hear from you, and that there now even is a constitutional amendment in the making. So quite clearly, the CDF is much more than just a way to channel funds into localities. It's something very dear to national politicians in Kenya, that are even willing to follow up on court judgments with constitutional amendments, just to make sure that this concept of CDF is retained. And also interesting that you spoke about, the efficiency of the disbursements. Very interesting. So it's not a unnuanced story. There is lots of different dimensions to it. So Zambia, let's go back to Tembo. Yeah. Do you see challenges with the constitutionality and how it fits into what you spoke about, the exclusive concurrent functions, the way it's being practiced in Zambia? Over to you, sir.
Not. There's certain things that we must still do, but so far we're going in the right direction. What I wanted to come back on is that, first of all, we don't have many legal challenges as we sort of continue this work in progress, because in our case, what happens is that we are very slow at developing policies. And once policies are developed, then putting into place the legal framework for enabling those policies. So by the time we are getting to implementation, we've gone through that process already. And I noted another difference between Zambia and Kenya. And yes, Doc, it's Zambia. Malawi hasn't joined us yet. I noticed another difference is that for us in Zambia, the CDF activities did not replace what the local authorities were doing. They were additional to what local government is doing. And in this progression, for instance, when the CDF started, the allocation was about, per capita was about $1 per capita. It is now up to about $7 per capita. But that increase has also come with increased functions. So the local authorities are supervising more work now than they used to before. So we don't have much of a problem with functions or overriding council function. We have other problems. I'll come to them when we get there. But also, this issue of members of parliament, as I said, our decentralization, the devolution process is a work in progress and it's a moving target. In the 2018 Act, members of parliament were chairmen of the constituency development funds. In the 2024 Act, they are not the chairman. In fact, they've been precluded from being chairman. And for all of us on this call, what might be interesting is to go online and download the 2018 CDF Act and the 2024 CDF Act to see what the movement is. It has always been in the right direction. We haven't gotten there yet. So the functions have remained and increased. The MPs' roles have been reduced. Because we start with policies and laws, we haven't had some serious legal challenges. Now, I needed to cover that area because I think it adds a dimension that was not very clear. Now I can go back to answering your question, Prof. What was the question?
Well, we can essentially turn also to the last question of the three questions that I had and maybe pick up on the question of what do you think needs to be done? I mean, clearly, Zambia has got a way of operating a CDF that seems to respect and work well with local government. But you say there are still challenges and there's still improvements needed. Where do you see the most important areas of improvement?
Okay, before I get there, let's just run through quickly where the position that we are at now, how it aligns with the norm of what devolution, decentralization, and stuff like that should be. One, that it aligns because the local leadership are very involved in decision making, and the community participates. The CDF integrates into the development plans of the local authorities. There is some effort at accountability, and because now the province approves rather than central government, those approval processes have come closer towards something. Now, what do we still have to do to become more, if you like, to improve our devolution so far? First of all, the local authority does not have full fiscal autonomy. The project lists still require provincial, national government approval. It has come down from central government to the province, so it's in the right direction. But the normative description of devolution includes autonomy, that the local authorities should have autonomy in making those decisions. Then there is the administrative primacy of local authorities is sort of, not quite as it should be, because CDF remains a constituency-based and not a council-based activity. So there is accountability lines, but this is what we should be working on. The approval process, even though it's at provincial level, could become a gatekeeper and then reduce the efficiency or the turnaround that can happen in implementing approved projects. And I'm going to the last one before I come to the penultimate one, because I'm passionate about the one. Accountability is upwards to the central government, but not sideways to the local stakeholders or downwards to the communities. So reports are sort of focused towards central government for approvals. And the last area we need to work on is the one that I'm most concerned with, is that the issue of capacities, because a lot of functions have been moved to local authorities, but we haven't quite built the capacities. In fact, there is a joke going on in Zambia that whereas the norm for decentralization and devolution is that finance follows functions, in Zambia, in some cases, finance has moved ahead of functions. So there is a capacity gap that we need to address. I think those are the issues where we sort of need attention now. But compared to where we were even in 2018, we are in a much better place. Could we do better? Yes, obviously. There are a lot of things that we can do better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew, from Zambia, not from Malawi. But I think the Zambian narrative is really, really instructive. Unfortunately, we don't have the Malawian expert with us. Gertrude did not manage to join. But we do see a lively exchange of also observations and quick overviews in the chat box in terms of other countries that also have constituency development funds. So this is fantastic that we are really using this opportunity to learn from each other what we do in the various countries that we are from. And I want to return to some of those questions in the chat box in a moment, but not before asking also Conrad the last question. In your view, what should be done? Because Kenya seems to be in a bit more of a contested space in terms of CDFs. What in your view should be done? What should be the next move to improve the situation surrounding the CDFs in Kenya? Conrad?
Thank you, Professor Devisa. Well, that is an interesting question in view of the current events and debates regarding CDF. And to some extent, it depends on who is answering that question. But I think based on first the history and development of CDF over the years, and secondly, based on the structures that we established in the 2010 Constitution, there are actually some very legitimate questions that we can ask regarding the present and future of CDF in the country. What we see, in my view, is a very persistent attempt by MPs, basically, to keep the CDF at whatever cost. Let me say that. And in my view, what that does, it eliminates from that debate the need to even look at what residual legitimate role that the CDF has been playing and what can be preserved within the structures. And as I said, most of the funding pre-2010 actually went into what we can call county government functions. And it has basically been retained for bursaries and building of police stations and others which are supposedly under the national government. Not because that is where the legitimate needs of the moment are, but mainly because they are trying to beat the constitutionality, the stand of the courts before them, which in my view, it should not be the motivation for such a kind of debate. The motivation should be that this is a fund that can complement local service provision. County governments have the constitutional primary duty of providing those services, and therefore, what can we do with these funds in these current arrangements, as opposed to retaining it at whatever cost? So, for instance, the fund has grown by over 200%. It was 21 billion Kenyan shillings at the start. Now it is at 52 billion Kenyan shillings. Yet, the projects that it's supposed to fund have supposedly reduced because they are now focusing at exclusively national government functions. I think the debate should be, should we have that size of funds for national government functions at the local level? Simply because you don't want county governments in it, because the MPs have actually stated publicly that even if we abolished the fund, this is a fund that is deducted from the shareable revenue, so we'll take it to whichever place except county governments. And you can see the political tussle over those funds. And I've been discussing with some colleagues on this, and I think it's possible for this fund to be retained, but as a conditional fund. And one of the conditional funds would actually be input from MPs on what they want to see in their constituencies. And this is actually submitted and considered by requirement of law by the county governments and implemented in accordance with a national framework managing those funds, as opposed to crazy arrangements like keeping it exclusively national, growing the fund, and because it's MPs in a particular year, there is a delay, then they usually have a way of putting pressure on the national treasury to release the funds immediately. And so I said that is how they quickly get the funds released and projects done and all that. But again, with a lot of accountability issues, that is the reality. So I think we need to fundamentally reorient the debate and see what legitimate functions this fund was serving before and now that it can do, but within the current constitutional structures in order to retain that. The push to have amendments that don't seem to sit well with the structure and spirit of the Constitution, and to persist with what was there even after fundamental change in the governance structures, I think it's just going to unnecessarily prolong illegitimate, in my view, illegitimate arrangements, and we have an opportunity to have a better debate where we can actually reorient the approach to management of these funds in a way that respects the structures that we adopted in 2010. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Bozide. It seems to me that the story and the approach in the two countries is different. In Kenya, it seems to be a bit of a stalemate, a butting of heads, a contestation. And in Zambia, it's more sort of a process of gradual alignment, or gradually finding one another. That's sort of a bit of a storyline that I see in the two different contexts that we discussed, but of course that's very rudimentary. I just want to scroll a little bit to the chat box and pick up on one or two of the questions and comments that were made. Many of them are just, really fascinating exchanges in the chat box, which we don't need to necessarily put into the meeting. But I think an important question from Patty on how the CDF projects align with local economic development objectives, which sit with the local government administration. I think both of you have spoken about how that works in practice, but feel free to give a further comment on that. And then further down, I see a very interesting point made by Winston about yes, you need strong coordination between CDF committees and local authorities, but it's important to keep in mind that in some cases, the MPs handling CDF are very powerful cabinet ministers. Let's not underestimate the power play that comes with the involvement of national politicians who, yes, they have their constituency, but they have a very strong national presence and national status, in some instances, even cabinet status. And then I think, as Conrad, you referred to it as the shadow of national overbearing politicians does come into play. We also have some interesting, very important comments from Nigeria on how Nigeria is also addressing this issue of how to structure a constituency development fund, and very helpful comments from Ansietis from Tanzania on the CDF structure in Tanzania. So really it is something that cuts across the continent, and is something that really is worthwhile exchanging notes about. Right, there is no sign of Gertrude, so we're going to have to make do without the Malawian input. But yeah, I think we are also not forced to use the full time of this webinar. We set aside an hour and a half, but there's no harm in ending a bit early. So we can aim for that. But maybe just to give the final word to our two panelists for a final parting shot before we close the webinar. Andrew, can we start with you? Your final observations, please.
Thank you so much. Points you raised was really about alignment. Now, what has happened in Zambia is that we have what we call the Vision 2030, which is a long-term aspiration of what we want to do. And within it, we make 5-year plans. The current one is the 8th National Development Plan. The 8th National Development Plan is the first plan that was made after the SDGs and aligns reasonably well to the SDGs. Now, what we are trying to do now, for instance, on assignment now with the UNDP, is to increase that awareness, because we have the Planning and Finance Act, which is like the Central Government Act. We have the Urban and Regional Development Act, which is about land. Then we have financial regulations in the local government finance bit. So we have a number of laws that prescribe how local authorities, even the CDF itself, it's got its own rules and regulations and volumes of guidelines. Now, it makes it difficult sometimes for the local authorities to align their activities properly. So what is going on now in the country, and part of that effort, is how we can develop some sort of orientation toolkit that will help the local authorities and the wards to be able to identify projects and their alignment to the 8th National Development and therefore to the SDGs, so that even as Zambia reports on her SDG achievements, the data will come from the communities who see what is happening. But at the moment, we have to create this consciousness of the fact that if you develop 5 new boreholes in a ward, you are actually contributing to a goal that is in the 8th National Development, which also speaks to SDG number 6. This awareness that we are doing a lot of things that are going the right way, but in some cases they are disconnected because we don't fully appreciate this framework in which we're supposed to be operating. So this is part of the homework we are doing now, and I'll be grateful for any lessons from anywhere. People who have advanced more on this issue of localization, it would be very useful because this is where we are now. We think we've moved a bit. I'll be presenting something to the government sometime tomorrow, but I still have a problem in my head. Even if we develop the toolkit, how do we go about creating awareness among 2,000 ward development committees, and if each one of them has 5 members, 10,000 people, how do we deliver? What delivery mechanism are we going to have? So this is an area that we are working on. So the projects that come from the wards, to a large extent, already aligned with the integrated development plans of local authorities, because that is part of what the authority does as they review the proposals. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew. Can I quickly sneak in a last question for you? I just got it now from Jacqueline. It's a question from Paddy about,
Sure.
the Paddy Ziyanusen. Given the fact that the CDF allocation has dramatically increased in recent years,
Yes.
with a specific reference to youth and women empowerment, what is the mechanism for citizen participation in the MNE, the monitoring and evaluation of CDF project? We haven't spoken a lot about that. How are they sort of monitored and evaluated afterwards? Who does that, and what's the role of citizen participation in that? If you can maybe give a very brief answer to that.
Thank you. At the moment, the citizen participation is very, very weak, which is why we hope if we do this localization and capacitate the ward people, they will be more aware. And as I said earlier, accountability is still sort of pointed towards central government. The local authorities report to central government. So accountability to the residents is not that strong. So the residents do not feel that they have a role to play other than identify the projects and see that they are implemented so that they have the services they desire. Their role in monitoring is really not as it should be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and thanks again for your participation and your very insightful comments. I think we were very fortunate to have you on this panel. Let's go over to Conrad for your final observations. Dr. Bozira, over to you.
Thank you very much, Yap and colleagues. So from my side, I think maybe what I can say as we finish this discussion is that Kenya, we are still battling between the old and the new with regard to local service provision. And these I'm talking about pre-2010 and post-2010. Understandably, the CDF played a very important role at a time when local authorities had basically they didn't have the relevant functions for local service delivery, and they didn't even have the resources to do that. And therefore, there was a very vital gap in terms of service delivery pre-2010, and the CDF played a very timely role. Part of the reason why the CDF, if you talk to ordinary Kenyans, they associate it with very good things that happened, and understandably so, before 2010, because the gap that was left by the local authorities across the country was massive, and the CDF sort of played that role. Now that we have the county governments in place with substantive roles, and part of the reason why the MPs, the national legislators, defend this, they say funds going to counties are being stolen, they're not being taken to development, and therefore we are coming to replace the funds stolen with funds for development. And I think the discussion should be, we are the House of Oversight, what are we doing about the funds which have been disbursed through county governments, as opposed to introducing parallel processes which are at the same time convenient. So there's a very fundamental debate that we need to have and settle about these processes, and that is at the core of the issues. In terms of the future, from where I stand, we have seen very strange things. Not surprised by what might come out. The courts have had a lot to say, especially about the constitutionality of CDF, and the parliament. They deployed a very extensive public participation process for the constitutional amendment. Basically they carried out hearings in all the 290 constituencies, and basically the feedback was that please don't take away CDF. So the bill is in the Senate. The Senate has introduced a Senate Oversight Fund, which has not been there. For me, when I step out of it, and in the context of these current discussions, we are basically not even looking at how national government programs complement decentralized delivery of services. It's basically how do political interests survive constitutional structures. And I don't know what kind of political horse trading that will take place, but I'm sure the courts will have to say something about that, and the debate will go on. If they carry on these constitutional amendments to the end, because the amendment process has also been challenged in court. The court has actually, there's a hearing tomorrow about conservatory orders, because the court said that, okay, you can continue with this debate, but you cannot forward the amendment to the president for assent before the constitutionality of the amendment is determined. So there's a very murky debate in court going on, and as I've said, it has everything to do with power relations, not local service delivery, and preserving political interests in the current dispensation. And as I said, there are actually alternative legitimate ways to discuss the preservation of this fund, but the politicians have chosen a different route. Yeah, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Conrad. It really seems like at the moment the Kenyan context around CDFs is contested, and the courts are playing a very big role in defining the way forward. And one would hope that out of that contestation emerges some sort of equilibrium that holds and that respects local democracy and county governance and devolution. But it seems that we're still a bit far away from that. So watch this space, and hopefully lessons can be learned across the continent from what Kenya is going through, what Zambia is doing, so that in the long run we can improve the way we manage these kinds of localization versus decentralization initiatives for the betterment of communities. So I want to thank you all very much for participating in this discussion. Thanks to our panelists, thanks to everyone who participated and who posed questions and observations in the chat box. I think it's been really insightful. I certainly learned so much from interacting with my panelists and with yourselves. I took careful notes, and I'm really keen to reflect further on this because clearly this is to be continued in many of the countries around the continent, sharing a history of introducing these kind of constituency development funding initiatives shortly after independence, but then they have followed different trajectories, which obviously is how things go, but very useful to compare across countries to see how they work and how they compare and contrast, hopefully with the aim of coming out with the right way forward. So let me leave it at that. And before I close off, quickly hand over to Jacqueline for just some final remarks about activities of the LPSA and warm invitations to you to stay involved. Jacqueline, over to you.
Thank you so much. I think it was really a fantastic session. The experts were really knowledgeable. They were open to sharing and candid about the challenges and also the achievements that we are seeing in this space. And the participants were absolutely fantastic, very engaging conversation. We really appreciate. I have to give a shout out to my fellow ASD alumni. I saw them in the chat box and in the list of participants. So it's really nice to see every one of you. Stanley, Gichana, of course, Winston, we saw quite a number, Anestas, so it's really nice to see you there. So on behalf of the LPSA Sub-Saharan Africa Working Group, I'm really happy to invite you. Anyone who's working in Kenya, whether you're a member of LPSA or not, as long as you're in the country or in the region and you're working on issues of decentralization and governance, we are inviting you to a special meeting that will be in person in Nairobi on October 24th this year from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Ole Sereni. The gathering will bring together government officials, policymakers, scholars, civil society practitioners, the usual members of LPSA and people who are not even members of LPSA. It will feature interactive networking. There will be food, so there will be dinner. Knowledge presentations as well, a World Cafe dialogue on specific issues that we want to discuss, but also it will also be an opportunity for us to help shape the agenda for LPSA Kenya, the Kenya chapter, and it will, as I said, conclude with a communal dinner designed for connection and collaboration. So please come, let's connect. You can find details on our website for registration. The link is also in the chat box. If you're in Kenya, whether you're a Kenyan or not, you're very welcome to this event. Judy will be one of our co-chairs who's also in the meeting group today. We'll be hosting this event with the support of the Sub-Saharan Africa Working Group and Secretariat. Again, Judy will also be hosting the next webinar on December 11th. Please make sure to register. The link should be in the chat box. This meeting is open for all of us who are members of LPSA, and we welcome anyone who's not a member and is in today's meeting. Please feel free to join us. It is free. You can join us at www.localpublicsector.org, where everyone can actually create a member profile. Please make sure that you register and so that you can stay updated to the upcoming events. It also gives you an opportunity to connect with other members of LPSA. You can also upload your CV, gives you visibility within the network, but also gives you exclusive access to resources. We have online trainings that are free for members, and for you to also stay up to date with our working group activities and events. And we have quite a number of activities coming up, particularly next year. So as we close, I would like to extend a really heartfelt thank you to Yap for moderating this fantastic session, for coming up with the idea around this topic. I want to appreciate our speakers, Conrad Bosire, Dr. Conrad Bosire, and Mr. Andrew Chitembo. You've really elevated this conversation, and we are really happy that you could join us and share with us. A special appreciation, as I say, to members of the working group, but also the new participants, and we really welcome the new faces of ISO today. Thank you so much for your active engagement and sharing your thoughts with us. So with that, I say thank you and look forward to seeing you in Nairobi or in December online. Thank you.